The day was July 22nd, 2021. EA Play Live was underway and we were in for a big announcement. This announcement came in the form of a trailer. The trailer was about a minute long, and in the end was confirmed to be announcing a remake is underway for the original Dead Space game that released in 2008. Dead Space was a sci-fi horror action game that took place, as the title suggests, in space, with creatures resembling zombies. This was a hugely popular horror game of the time, but being so much time has passed, I want to talk about this announcement and whether or not we should be excited. First, I would like to talk about the original release of the game. Dead Space released in 2008 for the Xbox 360 and the PS3 consoles. It released later on PC, but received a poor port, which resulted in many gameplay issues before patches were made. I have only played the console versions of the game, so that is what I will be referring to as I discuss this series. I am recording this using an Xbox Series X, but the only improvements this offers at the time is improved load time, so there's no FPS boost or anything like that. The ambient environmental noises and sound effects seamlessly pair with the sound effects of enemies and of yourself moving around to the point of constantly having to check behind you and around corners. Combine these audio effects with the fact that from very early on you find enemies coming from behind you, with the only indicator being to listen to your surroundings. You are constantly having to doubt yourself and be extra vigilant to ensure your own survival, encapsulating the spirit of horror. I don't want to get into spoilers in this video, but I just want to say the story and the lore are great. Think of it like H.P. Lovecraft wrote Alien. This series delves deeply into insanity horror that Lovecraft is well known for, but don't expect some Cthulhu monster in this title. With that much background to the series, let's get into this announcement trailer I mentioned. From the very beginning, you can hear the monsters known as necromorphs moaning and scraping on metal. If you have played the game previously, this audio alone should be enough to get your heart pumping and feeling like you're back on Aegis 7. Eventually we get to the point of seeing Isaac Clarke, the protagonist and player character in the series. He is bent over a workbench, and above him you can see the iconic phrase scrawled in blood on the wall, "Cut off their limbs." And that's it. As a refresher, I will play my experience with the scene they are referencing from the original game. Before this point in the game, you hadn't had a weapon and have just been running from monsters as they advance on you while destroying everything in their way. This is when you receive the plasma cutter, which will be your primary weapon for much of the game. The implication of this phrase lets you know you are about to get into a gore fest. Before this game came out, there was not much dismemberment in action games for logistical reasons, as having a static asset that remains in-game and is interactable to the player freely was a resource-consuming mechanic and relatively new. In a lot of games at the time, you would maybe shoot an enemy in the head and the head would disappear, or it would fall off but then soon disappear and was not interactable in any way, shape, or form. I'll be honest, the utilization of this mechanic in-game was mind-blowing to me. When this game released, this phrase is where the horrified excitement began for one of my own favorite gaming experiences. This was a really good announcement trailer to get a fan like me excited. But we all saw what happened with Cyberpunk trailers versus reality. So let's talk about the reality behind this announcement. The dev studio behind this game is the same as had originally made the game, that being Motive Game Studio under EA. The team on Motive Studios working on the Dead Space remake are publicly available. On screen, I will have a list of confirmed devs with the titles they are known for working on. Based on what I'm seeing, this looks like a hand-picked team with spectacular credentials. In fact, there are still openings on the team for expansion. The developers are using the current iteration of the Frostbite game engine, the same engine used for titles like Assassin's Creed, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and Battlefield. These games all handle and look phenomenal to me. This engine handles many assets and shaders, moving and interacting with each other very well, while also having the game look graphically superior to most games in my opinion. I am not an EA fanboy, and have my fair share of criticism for the production company. But in all fairness, I do feel this is a superior game engine to many. Dead Space was not originally created with Frostbite, but how the devs handled utilizing bright light sources shining into dark spaces and used complex audio to really artificially make the textures look better and create a feeling of a bigger, more interactive environment than there really is. I think using this engine alone is going to allow an enormous graphical boost to the world, and more moving parts to the world to make it feel even more real than it did in the original release. Now let's segue a bit into other remakes that were released to give a bit of context for a basis of expectations. Many re-released games were advertised as being remastered, which just means the game was re-rendered in a higher resolution with some basic bug fixes. Maybe a frame rate boost, maybe remove load screens and call it a day. Generally speaking, in my opinion, remastered editions of games have negligible improvements and aren't worth the price tag. Then we get re-releases like Crysis, with marketing suggesting the meme of "Will it run Crysis?" will be relevant once again. I pre-ordered this release and played day one, and let me tell you, it was strange. Playing in mid-tier graphical settings, the lighting and bloom effects looked hyper-realistic. It was astounding how good they looked, to be honest. However, these effects were pasted on top of dated textures. It looked to me like everything except for the lighting and like the explosion effects and that kind of stuff. It looked like everything else was completely vanilla, exactly what was in the original Crysis game, and it just had hyper-realistic fire, explosions, and the like on top of that. It created an uncanny valley feeling that took me out of the combat and made the game not fun to play. Nowadays, the team behind Crysis heard these complaints and fixed the game to look good again. And honestly, it really does. I've played this game since all of these patches and updates have come out, and it really is a great looking and great to play game. I highly recommend it. But again, this only happened after post-release complaints. This brings us back to the Dead Space remake. We can focus on their choice of words. This isn't a remaster or a re-release. This is a remake. This implies to me that this is a top-to-bottom new version of the game we all loved. I had to go into studio statements about this release to understand where to place my expectations. At the time of making this video, the studio stated that this game will feature updated accessibility settings. I'm expecting this to offer things like colorblind modes for people like me, enlarges on-screen text for people with less than optimal eyesight, and that sort of stuff that you typically see in AAA games today. They also stated that they will be including nods to later games in the series as well. I've only played the first two entries in the series at the time of recording this. I'm not terribly sure what this will mean. I'm hoping it will just be a few terminal and audio logs that reference lore events in the greater universe of the story. As long as it's not a bunch of unnecessary referential memes in the game, that sounds fun to me. The team have also confirmed there will be no microtransactions in the game, which I understand why with the drama of the third game in the series, but it doesn't need to be that black and white. Just don't let it be a pay to win, and don't shove it in my face every 10 seconds, and it's not an issue. I would be totally fine if they wanted to create cosmetic skins for weapons and armor that could be purchased. But hey, I'm not going to beg for microtransactions. I don't care, I don't need them, I don't want them. And finally, the last piece of news I have for this title. The studio confirmed they will be completely redrawing assets and textures. That is exactly what I needed to hear. If the statements they have made for this game are completely representative of the reality for production, I am one happy boy. To hear my favorite horror game of all time isn't just getting upscaled to 4K, but will be redrawn to fully utilize the modern game engine and consumer hardware, the potential for this game is absolutely there from my perspective. As I've already mentioned in this video, and as we've learned from Cyberpunk, wrong. No matter how good the team is, no matter how good the track record is, or the game engine footage, we don't really know what we are getting until release day. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this announcement dissection. Please feel free to like if you did, and subscribe if you don't want to miss my future videos. And beyond all that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.